What happens when the life you threw away becomes the one you can only dream of? For Alex Davenport, a celebratory dinner with his new younger girlfriend was meant to be a victory lap, a toast to his new beginning after leaving a marriage he called stale. But fate, in a cruel and spectacular twist, had booked him a front row seat to his own obsolescence. In the most expensive restaurant in the city, he was about to become an unwitting audience to the moment his ex-wife, the woman he deemed not good enough, was claimed by a world he could never afford to enter. This isn't just a story about love found and lost. It's about the shattering illusion of greener grass and the deafening silence of regret. The divorce papers had felt like a finish line to Alex Davenport, crisp, official, and final. He had signed them with a sense of buoyant relief, the kind a man feels when he believes he's just narrowly escaped a lifetime of beige monotony. His marriage to Isabella had in his mind become a comfortable old sweater, worn-in, predictable, and utterly devoid of thrill. For 12 years, Isabella had been his anchor. She was the one who remembered his mother's birthday, the one who knew he liked his coffee with exactly 1/2 a spoon of sugar, the one who had quietly shelved her own ambitions as a freelance graphic artist to support his climb up the corporate ladder at Sterling Price Solutions. She had created a home, a life, a seamless backdrop against which he could perform his role as a successful senior project manager. But for Alex, the backdrop had become the entire view, and he found it suffocatingly bland. Then came Chloe. Chloe was a flash of lightning in his overcast world. 26 years old, a junior marketing associate at his firm, she was all vibrant energy, ambitious, chatter, and admiring glances. She laughed at all his jokes, even the bad ones. She looked at him not as the man who forgot to take out the recycling, but as Mr. Davenport, a man of importance and authority. She made him feel powerful, desired, and most intoxicatingly young. The affair had been a clumsy, exhilarating secret, full of whispered calls and long lunches. It culminated in the conversation Alex had rehearsed in his car for weeks. He'd found Isabella in their small garden, tending to her lavender plants. Her hands were smudged with dirt, her brow furrowed in concentration. She looked up and smiled, a genuine, uncomplicated smile that for a fleeting second made his stomach clench with a feeling he refused to name. "Alex, you're home early," she'd said, wiping a smudge of dirt from her cheek. "We need to talk, Izzy." He hated that he still used her pet name. It felt like a betrayal of his new future. He'd laid it all out with the sterile precision of a project plan. He wasn't happy. He felt held back. He needed more. He never once mentioned Chloe. He framed it as a personal journey, a quest for a self he had lost. Isabella hadn't screamed or thrown things. Her reaction was far worse. She had simply deflated, like a balloon pricked by a pin. The light in her soft brown eyes dimmed, her shoulders slumped, and a silence so profound fell between them that Alex could hear the buzzing of a bee on a nearby lavender sprig. "After everything we built," she had finally whispered, her voice cracking. "The sacrifices. My work. It's not about you, Izzy. It's about me." He'd insisted, the classic coward's defense. The divorce was swift and brutal. Alex, eager to start his new life, had been ruthlessly efficient. He kept the larger share of their joint savings, arguing his salary had been the primary source. He moved into a sleek, modern bachelor pad downtown, the kind with floor-to-ceiling windows and an obscene maintenance fee. Isabella left with the modest proceeds from their shared home, and a shattered sense of self moved into a small, one-bedroom apartment on the other side of town, in a neighborhood she once would have called up and coming with a polite smile. For the first few months, Alex was euphoric. Life with Chloe was a whirlwind of trendy bars, weekend getaways he put on his credit card, and the kind of passionate, performative affection that looked great on Instagram. He felt reborn. He rarely thought of Isabella, and when he did, it was with a pang of pity. He imagined her in her small apartment, probably painting sad, dreary canvases, surrounded by cats growing older and lonelier. The thought perversely validated his decision. He had escaped. He was winning. He never called her. Their only communication was through terse emails about finalizing the last of their shared assets. Her replies were always prompt, polite, and impersonal. It was as if the 12 years they'd shared had been a dream. She'd woken up from leaving no emotional residue. This bothered him more than he cared to admit. He expected grief, anger, pleading. He received only quiet, dignified severance. One evening, about 8 months after the divorce was finalized, Chloe was scrolling through her phone, pouting. "My friends are all going to Aria Ristorante for Ashley's birthday next month," she said. Her voice laced with manufactured despair. "We can never get a reservation." Aria was the city's pinnacle of fine dining. It was a place for titans of industry, old money, and major celebrations. A reservation was a status symbol. A meal there cost what Alex used to budget for a month of groceries. "I want to go," Chloe continued, draping herself over his lap. "I want to post a picture from there. Everyone will be so jealous." Alex felt a familiar pressure in his chest. Keeping up with Chloe's desires was a financial tightrope walk. His salary, which had seemed so impressive when he had Isabella's frugal sensibility balancing the budget, was straining under the weight of designer handbags, 5-star hotel weekends, and now the prospect of a 4-figure dinner. But seeing the desire in Chloe's eyes, the way she looked at him as a provider of all things shiny and new, was his drug. It was the validation he'd left his marriage to find. "Don't worry, babe," he said, stroking her hair, with a confidence he didn't feel. "I have connections at sterling price. I'll pull some strings. I'll get us a table." It took him 2 weeks, a called-in favor from a vice president he'd once done a massive solid for, and a considerable amount of groveling, but he did it. He secured a reservation for a Saturday night 1 month away. "See," he'd said, showing Chloe the confirmation email. "I told you, your man gets things done." Chloe had squealed, kissing him sloppily. "Oh, Alex, you're the best. I need to buy a new dress. Something amazing." As he watched her scroll through online boutiques, his mind flickered unbidden to Isabella. He remembered a time they'd saved for 6 months to go to a much humbler Italian place for their 5th anniversary. Isabella had worn a simple blue dress he'd bought her, and she'd glowed with a happiness so pure it needed no audience, no Instagram filter. He pushed the thought away. That was the old life, the boring life. He was Mr. Davenport now, the man who could get a table at Aria. He was on his way up. While Alex was building his new life on a foundation of credit and ego, Isabella was quietly excavating the ruins of her old one. The first few months were a blur of grey. The small apartment felt like a prison, its silence amplifying the loudness of her grief. Every morning she woke up with a phantom limb sensation, reaching for a space in the bed that was no longer occupied. She had packed away every photo of Alex, but his ghost remained. It was in the brand of coffee she still bought out of habit, in the way she'd start to say something to an empty room, in the sudden gut-wrenching memory of his laugh. She had given so much of herself to their marriage that she wasn't sure what pieces were left. One rainy Tuesday, while unpacking a long-forgotten box, her fingers brushed against the smooth, cool surface of her professional-grade drawing tablet. It was a Wacom Cintiq she had bought herself with her first big freelance check years before she met Alex. She had been so proud of it. She pulled it out along with her collection of styluses. The tablet was dusty, a relic from a version of herself she barely recognized. She plugged it in. The screen flickered to life, a blank white canvas. For an hour she just stared at it. Then hesitantly, she began to draw. There was no plan, no client brief. She just let her hand move, channeling the knot of emotions in her chest onto the screen. She drew jagged lines of anger, swirling vortexes of confusion, and soft, smudged shapes of sorrow. She drew until her wrist ached and the sun had set. The only light in the room coming from the glowing screen. For the first time in almost a year, she felt a flicker of something other than pain. She felt purpose. That night marked a turning point. Isabella started drawing every day. She reactivated her old portfolio website, cringing at the outdated projects. With a surge of determination, she began creating new pieces. Her style had changed. It was bolder, more evocative, imbued with a raw emotion her earlier, more commercial work had lacked. She drew portraits of resilience, abstract landscapes of her internal world, and powerful minimalist designs that spoke volumes. To make ends meet, she took on small, unglamorous design jobs, logos for local bakeries, flyers for yoga studios. But in her own time, she built her portfolio. She started posting her personal work on a curated Instagram art account. At first, a few dozen followers became a few hundred, then a few thousand. People responded to the honesty in her work. About 6 months into her new life, an email landed in her inbox that she almost deleted as spam. The subject line read, "Invitation, New Voices, Charity Art Auction." It was from one of the city's most prestigious contemporary art galleries. They had seen her work on Instagram and wanted to feature one of her digital prints in their annual charity event, a high-profile gathering of the city's patrons of the arts. Isabella was floored. She read the email 3 times, her heart hammering against her ribs. The piece they wanted to feature was a deeply personal one she'd titled Kintsugi Heart, a depiction of a human heart fractured with shimmering gold lines filling the cracks, a tribute to the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery. It was a visual representation of her own healing process. The night of the auction was terrifying and exhilarating. Isabella, used to a life of comfortable obscurity, felt out of place among the city's elite with their tailored suits and couture gowns. She wore her best dress, a simple but elegant emerald green sheath that she'd bought from a consignment shop, and clutched a small glass of champagne with a white-knuckled grip. She stood near her displayed piece, watching people mill about. Most gave it a polite glance and moved on. She was starting to feel foolish for even coming when a man stopped in front of her print. He didn't just glance, he studied it. He was tall and impeccably dressed in a dark charcoal suit, but he lacked the stuffy, self-important air of many of the other guests. He had kind, intelligent eyes and a thoughtful expression. He leaned in, reading the small plaque with the title and her name. "Isabella Rossi," he said, turning to her. "It's a beautiful name. Is it yours?" Isabella was taken aback. Yes, it is. I'm the artist." "Julian Croft," he said, extending a hand. His handshake was firm and warm. "Your work is incredibly powerful. Kintsugi Heart, the philosophy of finding beauty in imperfection. It's not a concept many people truly understand, let alone express so eloquently." Isabella felt a blush creep up her neck. "Thank you. It's personal." "The best art always is he replied, his gaze returning to the print. "It speaks of resilience, of rebuilding something stronger and more beautiful than it was before it was broken." He looked back at her, and his eyes held a depth of understanding that made her feel truly seen for the first time in years. "That takes immense strength." They talked for nearly an hour, standing by her artwork. He wasn't just making polite conversation. He asked insightful questions about her process, her influences, and her journey back to art. She found herself opening up to him, speaking about her passion, with an enthusiasm she thought she had lost forever. She learned he was the founder of a successful green technology firm, a self-made man who had a genuine passion for art and innovation. There wasn't a hint of arrogance about him, only a quiet confidence and a palpable curiosity about the world. When the auction for her piece began, Isabella's stomach was in knots. The bidding started low. Then Julian Croft raised his paddle. Another person countered. The price crept up. Isabella held her breath. Finally, the bidding stalled and the auctioneer's gavel came down. "Sold to Mr. Julian Croft." Julian turned to her with a warm smile. "I had to have it," he said simply. It's a story that deserves to be on a wall, not just a screen. Then he did something unexpected. The artist is as compelling as the art. I was wondering, Isabella, if you would allow me to take you to dinner sometime next week to celebrate. Isabella's mind, for so long a cluttered mess of past hurts, suddenly felt clear. She saw no ghosts, no shadows of Alex. She saw only a kind, handsome man who saw value in her, not for who she was in relation to someone else, but for who she was standing on her own. "I would love that, Julian," she said, and the smile that spread across her face was not the comfortable, familiar smile of the old Izzy. It was the radiant, hard-won smile of Isabella. The weeks that followed were a revelation for Isabella. Her dinner with Julian was at a charming, understated French bistro, not a place to be seen, but a place to truly connect. The conversation flowed as easily as it had at the gallery. He listened, truly listened, when she spoke of her dreams of opening a small design studio. He didn't just offer platitudes, he offered practical advice, drawing parallels from his own early days as an entrepreneur. Their dates were never about ostentatious displays of wealth. He took her to a dusty old bookstore he loved, to a jazz club in a basement, to a quiet beach an hour out of the city to watch the sunset. He was fascinated by her mind, her creativity, her resilience. With him, she felt her world, which had shrunk to the size of her small apartment, expand into a universe of possibility. He celebrated her successes, no matter how small. When she landed a major branding contract with a boutique hotel, he showed up at her door with a bottle of her favorite champagne and 2 glasses. To the CEO of Isabella Rossi Designs, he toasted, his eyes twinkling. Isabella had never felt so cherished, so respected as an equal. Julian's wealth was a fact of his life, but it wasn't the substance of it. The substance was his character, his intellect, and his unwavering support. Her art flourished, her business grew, and the deep-seated ache of her divorce faded into a distant, painless scar. The name Alex became something she might recall with a detached sense of pity, like remembering a foolish choice she made in her youth. Meanwhile, Alex's life was a different story. The initial thrill of his relationship with Chloe was beginning to curdle into a constant, low-grade anxiety. Chloe's affection was transactional. It was contingent on his ability to provide a certain lifestyle, a certain image. Their conversations rarely strayed from gossip, her friends, her wardrobe, or their next vacation, which she was already planning for the Bahamas, and he had no idea how to afford. The sleek, modern apartment felt less like a bachelor pad and more like a sterile showroom. Chloe had filled it with her own things: pink cushions, glittery decor, and an endless array of beauty products that colonized the bathroom. There was no trace of Alex's own personality, not that he was sure what that was anymore. He found himself growing irritable. Chloe's constant need for validation on social media was exhausting. Every meal, every outing required a dozen photos, each one curated and filtered, to project an image of effortless bliss that felt utterly fraudulent. One night, he came home tired after a grueling day at work. Chloe was upset because he had forgotten the 3-month anniversary of their first real date. "It's like you don't even care, Alex," she'd cried, her voice sharp. "My friends' boyfriends do huge surprises for them." Alex, thinking of his dwindling savings, snapped back. "I work all day to pay for this apartment, Chloe. To pay for the things you want. I can't remember every single insignificant date." The word insignificant hung in the air, thick and ugly. "Insignificant," she shot back. "My happiness is insignificant to you. Maybe I should find someone who thinks it's significant." The fight ended with Alex apologizing profusely and promising to make it up to her. The way to make it up to her, of course, was the upcoming dinner at Aria. It had taken on a mythical importance in their relationship. It was his proof to her and to himself that he was still the successful, powerful man she'd fallen for. It was the gesture that would smooth over the growing cracks in their foundation. As the date approached, Alex felt a knot of dread in his stomach. He looked at the restaurant's menu online, the prices making his eyes water. He thought of Isabella and how they used to delight in trying to recreate fancy recipes at home, laughing as they made a mess in the kitchen. Their happiness had been so cheap, so easy. He quickly shoved the memory away. That was boring. This was exciting. This was the life he chose. The Saturday of the reservation arrived. Alex put on his best suit, a charcoal grey number that felt a little tight around the middle. He watched Chloe get ready. She spent 2 hours on her hair and makeup, finally emerging in a glittering, skin-tight red dress that was designed to command attention. "How do I look?" she asked, striking a pose for a selfie. "Amazing," Alex said, his voice hollow. He felt less like he was taking his girlfriend to dinner and more like he was escorting a celebrity to a red carpet event. Across town, Isabella was also getting ready. Julian had told her to dress up for a special evening. He was celebrating the 1-year anniversary of the night they met at the art auction. She chose a sophisticated midnight blue silk gown. It was elegant and understated, a gift from Julian that had made her gasp when she first saw it. Her hair was styled in soft waves, and her makeup was minimal, accentuating the confident glow she now wore naturally. When Julian arrived, he was holding a single perfect white rose. "You look breathtaking, Isabella," he said, his voice full of genuine awe. "Even more beautiful than the day we met." "You're not so bad yourself, Mr. Croft," she teased, her heart full. "I made a reservation somewhere special," he said, as he helped her with her coat. "A place I think is worthy of the occasion. Aria Ristorante." Isabella smiled. "Fancy. Are you sure you can get a table?" she joked, knowing full well he probably owned a piece of the company that owned the restaurant. "I think I was able to pull a few strings," he said, with a wink. As they drove towards the restaurant in Julian's silent, luxurious electric car, Isabella felt a profound sense of peace. Her life was her own. Her happiness was her own. She was with a man who loved her for who she had become, not for who he wanted her to be. The past was a closed book, gathering dust on a shelf she never visited. She had no idea that tonight, fate was about to force that book wide open, right in front of the man who wrote its most painful chapter. The valet at Aria Ristorante was a ballet of quiet efficiency and luxury vehicles. Alex pulled up in his decidedly mid-range sedan, feeling a prickle of inadequacy as he handed the keys over behind a gleaming new Porsche. Chloe, however, was oblivious, already taking a video of the restaurant's grand marble-arched entrance for her Instagram story. "It's even more beautiful in person." She breathed, her eyes wide. Inside the restaurant was a hushed cathedral of fine dining. Low, intimate lighting glinted off crystal glasses and polished silver. The air smelled of money truffles and quiet importance. The maitre d', a severe-looking man with a slick of silver hair, found Alex's name on the list with a barely perceptible nod of approval. "Ah, yes, Mr. Davenport. Your table is ready. This way, please." And he led them to a small but well-placed table for two. It wasn't the best table in the house. Those were clearly the larger booths by the panoramic windows overlooking the city. But it was respectable. It was in the main dining area, visible. For Chloe, that was all that mattered. "This is perfect," she whispered, already snapping a picture of the meticulously folded napkin. Alex tried to relax, but he felt a persistent tension. He was an imposter here. He studied the wine list, the prices causing a fresh wave of panic. He ordered a bottle he vaguely recognized, hoping it sounded impressive enough. Across town, Julian's car pulled up to the curb. He didn't use the valet, instead, handing his keys to a different attendant who greeted him by name. "Good evening, Mr. Croft. We have your usual table ready." He led Isabella through the entrance, bypassing the maitre d' station entirely and heading towards the best part of the restaurant. He guided her to a plush, semicircular booth right by the floors-to-ceiling window, offering a dazzling, uninterrupted view of the city skyline. The table was already adorned with a small, elegant bouquet of white freesia, Isabella's favorite flower. "Oh, Julian," she whispered, touched by the thoughtful detail. "It's magnificent." "Only the best for my favorite artist," he said, smiling as he slid into the seat opposite her. Their table was slightly elevated from the main floor, giving them a sense of privacy, while still being part of the restaurant's ambient buzz. From their vantage point, they could see most of the dining room below them. Alex and Chloe had just received their appetizers when Chloe suddenly nudged him, her phone pointed discreetly across the room. "Alex, look at that ring," she whispered, a covetous gleam in her eye. "On that woman in the blue dress. Up in that booth by the window. It's huge." Alex's gaze followed hers, drifting past the other diners to the elevated section. He saw the booth, the spectacular view, the woman in the elegant dark blue dress. Her back was mostly to him, but she was laughing, her head tilted back slightly. There was something achingly familiar about the line of her neck, the curve of her shoulders. He saw the man opposite her, saw the way he was looking at her, with an expression of pure adoration. "Probably some tech billionaire and his latest trophy wife," Alex muttered, a bitter taste in his mouth. He felt a sharp pang of envy, not just for the money, but for the effortless ease with which the man occupied his space, his world. He tried to focus back on Chloe, who was now complaining about the angle of her photo. "The lighting here is making me look washed out." Isabella, meanwhile, was telling Julian about a hilarious mishap with a new client, her hands gesturing animatedly as she spoke. She felt completely at ease, bathed in the warm glow of the candlelight and Julian's affection. She had no reason to scan the room, no reason to look for ghosts. Her world was right here in this booth with this man. The evening wore on. Alex and Chloe's conversation was stilted, punctuated by long silences, while Chloe edited photos on her phone. Alex felt the pressure of the bill mounting with every sip of overpriced wine. He was trying to project an air of nonchalant wealth, but he felt like a boy playing dress-up in his father's suit. He found his eyes drifting back to the couple in the window booth. They seemed to be in their own bubble. They weren't taking pictures. They were just talking, laughing, their heads close together. The woman shifted slightly, turning more into the light. And then Alex saw her face. The wine glass in his hand froze halfway to his lips. His breath hitched. The ambient chatter of the restaurant, the clinking of cutlery, the soft music, it all faded into a roaring silence in his ears. It couldn't be. But it was. It was Isabella. She wasn't the sad, mousy woman he pitied in his imagination. She was radiant, transformed. Her face, which he had last seen pale and tear-streaked, was now luminous with happiness. Her simple consignment shop style had been replaced by an effortless elegance that screamed of quality, not flash. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. And the man she was with, he exuded a quiet power and confidence that Alex could only mimic. This wasn't just a rich man. He looked at Isabella as if she were the center of the universe. A toxic cocktail of shock, disbelief, and a searing, unexpected jealousy surged through Alex. Who was this man? How did his Isabella, the quiet, unassuming woman he had left behind, end up here in a better seat, with a better man looking happier than he had ever seen her? "Alex, Alex, are you even listening to me?" Chloe's sharp voice cut through his daze. "I was saying, I think I want the lobster." Alex tore his eyes away from Isabella, his heart pounding. "What? Oh, yeah, get the lobster." But his focus was gone. He couldn't stop sneaking glances back at the booth. It was like watching a scene from a movie in which he was supposed to be the star, only to find he'd been written out of the script entirely and replaced by a better actor. Every laugh Isabella shared with the man felt like a personal insult. Every warm look they exchanged was a dagger in his ego. He had told himself he was the winner in their divorce. He had the younger woman, the exciting life, the freedom. But looking at Isabella, now glowing with a confidence and joy he had never been able to inspire in her, He felt a sickening realization dawning. Maybe he hadn't escaped to prison. Maybe he had just willingly walked out of paradise and locked the door behind him. The main courses arrived, Chloe's lobster and his own ridiculously expensive steak. But Alex could barely taste it. His gaze was fixed across the room, a helpless, horrified spectator at the premiere of his ex-wife's spectacular new life. And the show, he was about to realize, was only just beginning. The world had shrunk for Alex. It now consisted only of his small, inadequate table and the luminous, impossibly distant booth by the window. Chloe's voice became a dull buzz. The taste of his food turned to ash in his mouth. He was watching a phantom, a ghost of the woman he thought he knew, and she was more real and alive than he had ever been. He watched as the waiter cleared Isabella and Julian's plates. He saw Julian lean forward, his expression tender and serious. He saw him reach across the table and take both of Isabella's hands in his. Alex felt his own hands clench into fists under the table. What was he saying to her? Chloe, oblivious, was trying to get the perfect, candid shot of herself, laughing at something witty Alex hadn't said. Alex, look at me and smile. It'll look more natural. Just a second, Chloe, he hissed, his eyes glued to the scene unfolding across the room. From his vantage point, he couldn't hear the words, but he could see everything. He saw Julian's thumb gently caress the back of Isabella's hand. He saw her lean in her face full of love and attention. In the booth, Julian's voice was low and steady. Isabella. He began, his heart in his eyes. A year ago tonight, I met a woman who was painting her own broken heart back together with lines of gold. I saw your strength before I ever knew your name. In this past year, I haven't just fallen in love with you. I've watched you fall back in love with yourself. I've watched you build a business from your soul and reclaim the joy that was always yours. Isabella's eyes welled with tears, but they were tears of pure happiness. Julian, she breathed, you don't just compliment my life, Isabella. He continued, his voice thick with emotion. You make it whole. You are the most passionate, resilient, and brilliant person I have ever known. I cannot imagine, and I refuse to imagine, a single day of my future without you in it. And then it happened. Slowly, deliberately, Julian released one of her hands. He reached into his jacket pocket. Alex watched his blood turning to ice. No. No, it can't be. Julian slid out of his side of the booth and knelt on one knee on the plush carpet beside their table. A collective, gentle gasp rippled through the part of the restaurant that could see. The hushed chatter died down. Diners turned their heads. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated, public romance. Chloe finally looked up from her phone, her eyes following the gazes of the other patrons. Oh my God, she whispered, her voice a mix of awe and envy. He's proposing. Alex felt like he had been punched in the gut. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't move. He was paralyzed, a statue of regret, forced to witness the single most romantic moment of his ex-wife's life orchestrated by another man. Julian opened the small velvet box. Even from across the room, the diamond caught the light, sending a shard of brilliance stabbing directly into Alex's eyes. It wasn't just a ring. It was a star. It was a declaration. Isabella Rossi. Julian said, his voice clear and true, ringing with a sincerity that Alex knew in his heart he had never possessed. You have rebuilt your life into a masterpiece. Will you let me be a part of it forever? Will you marry me? Isabella was crying freely now, her hands covering her mouth. She nodded, unable to speak, then found her voice in a choked sob. Yes, she whispered. Oh, Julian, yes, of course, yes. A wave of applause broke out in the restaurant. People were smiling, some raising their glasses to the happy couple. Julian slid the magnificent ring onto her finger, stood up, and pulled her into a deep, loving kiss that spoke of a shared future, of profound connection, of a love that was built not on escaping the past, but on honoring it and building something better. The applause was like thunder in Alex's ears. Chloe was practically bouncing in her seat. Wow, can you believe this, in Aria? And look at that ring. It must be like 10 carats. She is the luckiest woman alive. Alex didn't hear her. He was staring at Isabella's face. He saw her laughing through her tears as Julian kissed her again. And in that moment, he saw the woman he had let go. Not the stale, boring woman from his narrative of self-pity, but a woman of incredible depth and passion, who had simply needed the right person to see her. He had been holding a masterpiece in his hands for 12 years and had traded it for a cheap print. The happy couple, absorbed in their moment, finally sat back down. Isabella was admiring the ring, her hand trembling. Her eyes, sparkling with joy, happened to drift across the room over the heads of the applauding diners. For a fraction of a second, her gaze met Alex's. There was no malice in her eyes, no triumph, no anger. There was just a flicker of recognition. A brief, almost imperceptible moment of surprise, followed by something far worse, a faint, detached pity. Then she turned back to her fiancé, to her new life, dismissing him as easily as one might notice a piece of furniture. He was nothing, a stranger, a footnote in a chapter she had already finished reading. That single look shattered Alex more than any screaming match ever could. His irrelevance was confirmed. "Isn't that romantic?" Chloe gushed, finally turning her full attention back to him. "Why do you look so weird? You look like you've seen a ghost." Alex stared at Chloe, at her glittery red dress, at the vapid excitement in her eyes, at the way she was already trying to discreetly film the celebrating couple. And for the first time, he saw her with painful clarity. She wasn't a lightning bolt, she was a sparkler. Bright, flashy, and quickly extinguished, leaving nothing but a wisp of smoke. "That woman," Alex said, his voice a dead hollow thing. "The one he just proposed to. That's Isabella." Chloe's jaw dropped. Her eyes darted from Alex's pale face to the woman in the window booth, her expression shifting from envy to disbelief and then to a sharp, cruel amusement. "That's your ex-wife," she scoffed, a little too loudly. "The boring one you told me about. Well, damn. Looks like she traded up. Big time." Her words, meant to be a casual jab, were a final, devastating blow. The truth of them, the public humiliation of the moment, the sight of Isabella's radiant happiness, it all coalesced into a tidal wave of regret, so powerful it threatened to drown him, right there at the table. The victory lap was over. He had just been lapped spectacularly by the person he'd left behind in the dust. The rest of the dinner was a masterclass in agony. Alex mechanically paid the bill, a staggering sum that made his stomach churn, barely registering the numbers. He was on autopilot, his mind a chaotic loop of the proposal, the ring, the applause, and that final pitying glance from Isabella. Chloe, for her part, had become insufferable. The initial shock had morphed into a kind of competitive indignation. She kept sneaking glances at Isabella's table, her commentary a stream of petty poison. "I can't believe that's her," she whispered, dissecting Isabella's appearance. "I mean, her dress is okay, I guess, but it's so plain. And did you see the guy? He's way older than you. She probably just went for the money. A classic gold digger." Each word was a desperate attempt to reassure herself of her own value, to tear down the woman who had in a single moment exposed the cheapness of their own relationship. But her words had the opposite effect on Alex. He knew Isabella. She wasn't a gold digger. She had stayed with him when he was a junior analyst making next to nothing. She had celebrated a promotion with a homemade pizza because they couldn't afford to go out. The man Julian hadn't looked at her like a possession. He had looked at her with reverence. The drive home was thick with a toxic silence. The sleek, modern apartment, once a symbol of his freedom, felt like a cold, empty box. As soon as the door closed, the dam of Chloe's resentment broke. "I cannot believe you took me to a restaurant where I had to watch your ex-wife get engaged to a freaking millionaire," she shrieked, throwing her purse onto the designer sofa. How embarrassing for me. Do you know how that makes me look? How it makes you look? Alex retorted, his own long-simmering frustration finally boiling over. This isn't about you, Chloe. It is about me. It's always about me. I am the one on your arm. I was the one sitting there while everyone was clapping for her. And that ring, Alex, did you see it? God, my friends are going to ask what we did tonight, and I'm going to have to tell them this story. It's humiliating. What's humiliating? Alex shot back, his voice rising. Is that you can only see the world through the lens of your phone. You didn't see a moment of genuine love. You saw a status update you couldn't compete with. You saw a price tag, not a person. Oh, so now you're defending her. Chloe's laugh was sharp and humorless. Mister, I need to escape my boring life. Looks like her life got a lot more interesting the second you left it. Maybe you were the boring one all along. The accusation hit him like a physical blow because he knew deep down it was true. He hadn't been held back by Isabella. He had been the dead weight in the marriage. His ego, his insecurity, his need for constant validation, that was the beige monotony. Isabella had been a vibrant colour he had been too blind to see. You know what? Alex said, his voice dangerously quiet. You're right. I was the boring one. And this? He gestured around the sterile apartment, at her, at the whole hollow facade of his new life. This is the most boring, predictable cliché I could have possibly fallen into. Yours, sir, what is that supposed to mean? Chloe demanded, her eyes narrowing. It means I'm done. Alex said the words tasting like liberation and despair. I am done with the endless performance, the credit card bills, the obsession with what other people think. I am done trying to impress a child who thinks love is measured in carrots and Instagram likes. Chloe stared at him, her face a mask of fury. You can't be serious. You're dumping me. After all this, you left your wife for me. No, Alex said, a wave of sickening self-awareness washing over him. I didn't leave her for you. I left her for an idea of myself that doesn't exist. You were just a prop. And I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for using you. The fight escalated into a flurry of shouted insults and slammed doors. By the end of the night, Chloe had packed a suitcase with her most expensive dresses and handbags, called a friend to pick her up and left, leaving Alex alone in the silent, cavernous apartment that was now officially just his. He sank onto the sofa, the one she had chosen, and put his head in his hands. The silence was deafening. There was no victory, no freedom, only the crushing weight of his own choices. He had torched his own life for nothing. Miles away, in a different world, Isabella and Julian were walking hand in hand through a quiet park, the city lights twinkling below them. The excitement of the restaurant had given way to a deep, serene joy. I still can't believe it, Isabella said, looking down at the ring sparkling on her finger. It's all been so perfect. The only perfect thing here is you, Julian said, pulling her to a stop under a large oak tree. He gently cupped her face. I did see you look across the room earlier. You saw him, didn't you? Isabella met his gaze, her expression honest and open. Yes, I saw him. And, Julian asked, his voice gentle, devoid of jealousy, only filled with concern for her. And, Isabella said, taking a breath, for a second I was surprised. And then, I felt a little sad for him. He looked lost. And then, she smiled a small, genuine smile. And then I turned back to you, and I didn't think of him again. He's a part of my story. He's the reason my heart was broken. But you, she reached up and touched his cheek. You are the reason it's stronger than ever. He is the past Julian. You are my forever. Julian leaned in and kissed her a kiss of reassurance, of trust, of a future built on truth and healed wounds. As they stood there, wrapped in their own perfect universe, Alex sat alone in his surrounded by the expensive wreckage of a life he had chosen, haunted by the ghost of a happiness he had thrown away. The contrast was absolute, the justice of it, poetic and cruel. 1 year later, the autumn sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns of a sprawling estate just outside the city. The sound of a string quartet and happy chatter drifted on the crisp air. It was Isabella and Julian's wedding day. The event was the epitome of understated elegance. It wasn't a spectacle for the media, but an intimate gathering of close friends, family, and key figures from the art and tech worlds who had become genuine friends. Isabella, in a stunning gown she had co-designed herself, looked serene and incandescently happy. Her design studio, Rossicroft Designs, was a thriving success. With Julian's business acumen and her raw talent, she had become one of the most sought-after branding experts in the city. She wasn't just a millionaire's wife, she was a creative force in her own right. Standing beside Julian at the altar, she spoke her vows with a clear, steady voice, her words a testament to second chances and the beauty of a love that was a partnership in every sense of the word. Julian, in turn, looked at her as if she were the only person in the world, his love for her a palpable force. On that same sunny afternoon, Alex Davenport was sitting on a park bench, eating a sandwich from a paper bag. His life had undergone a dramatic downshift. After Chloe left, he had stayed in the expensive apartment for 3 more months, the rent payments eating away at his savings until he could no longer sustain the charade. He sold the designer furniture for pennies on the dollar and moved into a small, functional apartment not unlike the one Isabella had first moved into, though his felt like a prison of failure, not a canvas for a new beginning. The breakup had sent ripples through his professional life. His connection at Sterling Price, the VP he had leaned on for the Aria reservation, had cooled towards him significantly after hearing whispers of the drama from colleagues Chloe had gossiped to. His confidence at work was shattered. He became hesitant, withdrawn, and his performance suffered. When a round of corporate restructuring was announced 6 months later, his name was on the layoff list. Redundant was the official term. It felt fitting. He was working now as a project coordinator for a smaller, less prestigious logistics company, earning 2/3 of his former salary. The flashy suits were gone, replaced by sensible off-the-rack attire. The sleek car had been sold to cover his debts. He was by all accounts just an ordinary man, stripped of the illusions he had wrapped himself in. He occasionally saw news of Julian Croft in the business journals, a new philanthropic initiative, another breakthrough in renewable energy. Sometimes Isabella's name was mentioned alongside his celebrating a new art exhibit or a design award. Each mention was a small, sharp sting. He had once stood next to that brilliance and had been too arrogant to see it too foolish to value it. He took a bite of his bland sandwich and looked at the people in the park. Families playing couples walking hand in hand. He saw a life of simple connection, the kind he had once dismissed as boring. He now understood that what he had with Isabella hadn't been monotony. It had been stability. It had been peace. It had been a quiet, unassuming form of wealth he had been too spiritually bankrupt to recognize. He had traded a life of genuine, if quiet happiness for a fleeting hit of ego-boosting excitement. He had cashed in 12 years of love and partnership for a currency that turned out to be worthless. He finished his sandwich, crumpled the bag, and tossed it perfectly into a nearby bin. He didn't feel anger anymore, or even sharp jealousy. All he felt was a profound, quiet emptiness and the dull, permanent ache of regret. He had been the audience to Isabella's happy ending, and in doing so, had been forced to finally read the title of his own story, The Man Who Had Everything and Realized It Too Late. He stood up from the bench and walked away, a solitary figure, disappearing into the anonymous afternoon crowd. His greatest legacy being the happiness of the woman he had set free. And so Alex Davenport's victory lap ended where it began, alone. This story is a powerful real-life reminder that the shiniest life isn't always the most valuable. Alex chased a fleeting image of success, only to realize true wealth was in the quiet moments, the shared history, and the unwavering support he had so carelessly discarded. Isabella, on the other hand, didn't find happiness by finding a millionaire. She found it by rediscovering herself. Her journey teaches us that our greatest comeback is always rooted in our own strength and self-worth. Have you ever seen karma play out so perfectly in real life? What do you think was Alex's biggest mistake? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If this story resonated with you, and you believe in the power of second chances and self-discovery, please give this video a like, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more dramatic true-to-life stories that make you think. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for listening.